Hi, I'm Claudia Banks, and I'm a law librarian from a law firm in Chicago. I've chosen the book Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin. It's, in fact, his first novel. It's as important today as it was in the 1950s when he wrote it. It tells the story of African Americans from the rural South to the North, particularly Harlem. And I've chosen a passage called Gabriel's Prayer. Now I've been introduced to the Father and the Son, and I ain't no stranger now. When Florence cried, Gabriel was moving outward in fiery darkness, talking to the Lord. Her cry came to him from afar, as far from unimaginable depths, and it was not his sister's cry he heard, but the cry of the sinner when he is taken into sin. This was the cry he had heard so many days and nights before so many altars, and he cried tonight as he had cried before. Have your way, Lord, have your way. Then there was only one silence in the church. Even praying Mother Washington had ceased to moan. Soon someone would cry again, and the voices began again. There would be music by and shouting and the sound of the tambourines. But now in this waiting, burdened silence, it seemed that all flesh waited, paused, transfixed by something in the middle of the air for the quickening power. This silence, continuing like a quarter, carried Gabriel back to the silence that had preceded birth in Christ. Like a birth indeed, all that had come before this moment was wrapped in darkness, lay at the bottom of the sea of forgetfulness, and was now counted against him, but was related only to that blind and doomed and stinking corruption he had been before he was redeemed. The silence was the silence of the early morning, and he was returning from the harlot's house. Yet all around him were the sounds of the morning, of birds, invisible, praising God, of crickets in the vines, frogs in the swamp, or dogs miles away and close at hand, roosters on the porch. The sun was not yet half awake. Only the utmost tops of trees had begun to tremble at his turning, and the mist moved had begun sullenly before Gabriel and all around him, falling back before the light that rules by day. Later he said of that morning that his sin was on him. Then he knew only that he carried a burden and that he longed to lay it down. This burden was heavier than the heaviest mountain, and he carried it in his heart. With each step that he took, his burden grew heavier, and his breath became slow and harsh. And of a sudden, cold sweat stood out on his brow and drenched his back. All alone in the cabin, his mother lay waiting, not only for his return this morning, but for his surrender to the Lord. She lingered only for this, and he knew it, even though she no longer exhorted him as she had in days but shortly gone by. She had placed him in the hands of the Lord, and she waited with patience to see how he would work the matter. For she would live to see the promise of the Lord fulfilled. She would not go to her rest until her son, the last of her children, he who would place her in the winging sheep, should have entered the communion of the saints. Now she who had been impatient once and violent, who had cursed and shouted and contended like a man, moved into silence, contending only, and with the last measure of her strength with God. And this too she did like a man. Knowing that she had kept the faith, she waited for him to keep his promise. Gabriel knew that when he entered, she would not ask him where he had been. She would not reproach him. And for her eyes, even when she closed her lids to sleep, would follow him everywhere. Later, since it was Sunday, some of the brothers and sisters would come to her to sing and pray around her bed, and she would pray for him. Sitting up in bed, unaided, her head lilted, her voice steady, while he, kneeling in a corner of the room, trembled and almost wished that she would die, and trembled again at this testimony to the desperate wickedness of his heart, and prayed without words to be forgiven. For he had no words when he knelt before the throne, and he feared to make a vow before heaven until he had the strength to keep it. And yet he knew that until he made the vow, he would never find the strength.